Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Donna Nixon, and this session is Be Well, a law school's approach to supporting students and building community. Please remain muted to minimize background noise. This session is being recorded. Also, live captioning is enabled. You can hide the captions by choosing, as a matter of fact, I'm sorry, I've just enabled it. You can hide the captions by choosing Hide Subtitle on the live transcript menu at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to submit questions via chat or during the Q&A at the end of the session. I will now turn the session over to my colleague, Rob Berenkott. Rob?
Thanks, Donna. Good morning, everyone. We thought a fun way to start would just be to introduce ourselves so you know who you'll be spending the next 40 minutes with. I'll begin. My name is Rob Berenkott. I'm the Assistant Dean for Career Development, UNC School of Law, and I'll turn it over to Dean Mack.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bianca Mack, and I'm the Associate Dean for Equity, Admissions, and Student Affairs. And I'm going to turn it over to Dean Kay.
Hi, my name is John Kasperzak. I am the Assistant Dean for Student Development at the UNC School of Law, and I will turn it over to Dean Smith.
Hey, good morning. My name is Kelly Podger-Smith, and I'm the Associate Dean for Careers and External Affairs. And I will turn it over to Trey Ellis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Trey Ellis. I'm a third-year law student at UNC School of Law and the student body president at the law school. I'm excited to be here. I'll turn it over to my brother, Jacob Brooks.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Jacob Brooks. I'm a 3L. I love the Atlanta Braves. Got the World Series championship. Let's go. And I made a C in torts. And I'm going to turn it over to Julius.
Good morning, everyone. I am Julius Brittman, the second year here at the law school. I am the 2L class rep, and I'm glad to be here. And I will turn it back over to Dean Berenkott.
Thanks, Julius. So before we get into the event that we organized and the planning process that we went about, we thought a good way to begin was just by providing a little bit of background and the atmosphere on the law school that led up to the event. So I will turn it over to Dean Mack to help everyone get a sense of the backdrop that led towards the planning of the Be Well event. Dean Mack.
Thank you. So law school is hard. And law school, I think, has always been hard, but add in a global pandemic and all of the challenges that just people in our community were facing over the past 2 years. And it brewed into the perfect storm. And those of us in the administration were trying to work with the students to identify what their biggest concerns were and then come up with ideas for how to alleviate some of the struggle and support our students. So a little bit about the admissions perspective. I see our students on their way in. So they're graduating college or they're working in industry and they decide that they want to go to law school and pursue a law degree. And these individuals are high achieving, they are in control of their lives, they have very clear goals and they can articulate them. And then they get to law school and it just makes a lot of individuals question who they are, why they wanted to do this. And it's hard. So Jacob alluded to it and he added some humor. Grades are a big deal. And so these students who have always been academically achievement oriented are receiving grades that maybe they've never seen before. And on top of that, they are struggling to connect with their fellow classmates and their faculty members and members of the administration in a remote capacity. So there were a lot of challenges within the program, within our building that made law school hard. And then our students were dealing with so many various challenges outside of school. So unfortunately, you can't leave that at the door. And in this last couple years, the environment was such that even the folks who were very adept at leaving life at the door, we entered everyone's home, whether it was work, it was school. And so life was just a part of what we were doing every day. So that's a little bit of the perspective. I'm going to pass it over to Dean Kay, because I think he really has his finger on the pulse and was meeting with the most students and can speak to the student perspective.
Thanks, Bianca. I mean, to me, I think what it comes down to is from March of 2020 on, our culture shifted a little bit. And by being forced to go remote immediately, and then being remote in the fall of 2020, and then somewhat in person after that, I think what we had was an erosion of trust. I think students didn't really get to know each other super well, or they did through a platform that was new. So that sense of community wasn't built like it normally is. And then, like you said, like from a faculty or a administrative or staff perspective, the students, you needed to see more than just kind of a talking head behind a screen. Even though we've been doing this for a long time, they want to put a body with a face, with a name, so that when they come to us with concerns or with problems, there's an inherent trust that is built. And I think that's one of the things that we were trying to establish through this program. So, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Dean Kay. And I'll open it up to the students if they're comfortable just sharing the student experience of going to law school in a pandemic. So students, if you're open to sharing, feel free to go ahead and unmute and offer your perspective on it.
Yeah, so as Dean Mack said, law school is very hard, and definitely felt, the brunt of that throughout this pandemic experience of being in law school. But putting that aside for a second, and I think Julius will touch on that aspect a little more. Just law school itself is extremely difficult. With the feeling of grades and that aspect being at play, there's a feeling for a lot of students that you have to perform at a certain level. And, rightfully so. You have students that are coming from backgrounds of excelling, and they want to excel at this newest venture in their life. So there's a feeling and a sort of pressure that you have to perform at a certain level. And, with that, there's this feeling of isolation that comes with that if you're not performing at that level, and it seems as if your peers around you are, that, you're isolated, and there's this false construct in your mind that you're going through any struggles that you may be having alone. And those aren't just struggles of grades and of things going on in the law school. I think one of the hardest things about experiencing, challenges, trials, and tribulations when it comes to mental health, particularly in law school, is that, law school is just one portion and one segment of your life as a student, right? Because life still keeps going on outside of law school. So it's like any what we'll call difficulties that are going on within law school, compounded by any difficulties that come with the day-to-day of life and everyone's life. And so with all of that together, especially in being in law school in a pandemic, which I think Julius will touch on, it was just very difficult and very much a struggle. And it's something that, was not at all easy to work through. And our efforts with this event was to help people along and let them know that they're not alone.
Thanks, Trey. Jacob, Julius?
I can go. What's it called? I don't know if Jacob's going to go, but I can start. I will say, I guess, just speaking from the second year experience, we had a largely unique one in that the beginning of law school was largely remote. And what that meant was a lot of people had to deal with the difficulties and stresses of law school by themselves. And that was very difficult. And I will say it was very difficult for myself. And the common sentiment amongst my peers was this notion of heightened stress and this feeling of not really feeling like a law student. And going into this past fall, a lot of people carried that feeling of isolation with them when it came to just interacting with their classmates. And so a lot of people that came into the law school, they went to class and they left. And one of the things that I guess really frustrated me was not being able to forge those connections with my peers, because in normal times, the stress of law school would be mitigated by these strong connections you have with other people. You'd be able to rely on them. You'd be able to vent your stress, and you'd have people who have this shared experience that'd be able to assist you with that. And yeah.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I came into law school a little bit later. I was an educator. I taught special education for several years before going to law school. And I don't want to dwell on this. It's a bit of a somber note, but I think that it's worth naming the tragedies that happened on campus in October. I've personally been affected by suicide, particularly a student that I had took their life. And I think mental health concerns are very real. And I just felt like it in this moment where we're so isolated, like to put ourselves in the perspective of law students are just students on campus. Like they're, for the most part, like they're not around their families. Perhaps their parents, their spouses, their best friends are across the state, the world, wherever it might be. And so it was really just a recognition that like, hey, we need to step in and make sure that everyone's got someone to have their back.
Thanks for sharing, everyone, and want to compliment Dean Mack, because she brought her whole community together to talk about these issues. And on October 14th, 2021, we got into a room. Students had an opportunity to share some of the struggles that you heard, and as an outgrowth of that conversation, we as administrators had a better sense of what the student concerns were, and we had a coalition of people that were willing to do something about it to make it better. And that's what got the ball rolling on our planning process. And so these were our goals. We wanted to have an event that would increase awareness of and access to mental health resources. We wanted to promote fun and relaxation, especially as final exams approached. And we wanted to build community. And these were our true north. This is where we were headed to. So we just lifted up anchor. We set sail. We knew this is where we wanted to go, but we had no idea how we were going to get there with this event. So the rest of our presentation is broken up into these three goals, and letting the different leaders that were involved in organizing the event talk about how they got there. So our first goal is how we went about increasing awareness of and access to resources, and I'll turn it over to Dean Mack to start the conversation on this particular goal.
Perfect, thank you. So as Dean Berencott mentioned, we had the community conversation in October, and I think that one was really the most productive one. And it was, as Jacob mentioned, the timing was so necessary. And I think we saw a lot of responses in different units and campus wide. And students really got to a point where they were demanding, please listen to us, and we need support from campus spaces. And so that was one thing, was how do we know what you need? So students really were open and vulnerable and told us, this is what we need from you. There were a couple of other new things that we were able to do in the last year. We were able to have an embedded counselor join our unit. So we had someone on campus who we were trying to work hard to make visible and make sure students knew she's here. Also, campus has a lot of resources, whether they're within our building. There are a number of us on the team on this call today, or people in the broader campus and in our community. So really it was about making sure that students knew, hey, we're here, we're visible, let us know what you need and how we can help you. So that was a lot of how we approached meeting the goal. And then I'm going to also, again, turn over to Dean Kay, because day to day, he really does lead our team's efforts for meeting with students, hearing what their challenges are, and then really coming up with responses.
Yeah, thanks, Dean Mack. I think two things to highlight. One is just to kind of reiterate what you said about kind of the faculty and staff at the law school being one of our primary resources, like, you know, people power. And it was really important for us to kind of be there and show up as much as, you know, we could. I think it happened at a good time. Like, if there's ever such thing as a good time in the pandemic, it happened at a good time in the pandemic, because I think rates were down and people felt a little more comfortable putting themselves out there, even masked, right? So, I also think that we tried to strategically position ourselves around the different events that we had, with different stations that we had, knowing that different stations might draw a different person, or, you know, like there might be someone who's a little more arts and craftsy and might come to something I was doing. There might be someone else who is okay dancing in a lighted room with their classmates, even though no one can hear each other's. And so, like, we tried to make sure that we were spread out and we had people in each spot, and we knew where each other was. So that if a student came to me and said, you know, oh, are you Dean Barancott? I would say no, but if you need to talk to him, this is where he is. So I think that was really important, and that helped to at least begin to build a little bit of familiarity and a little bit of the relationships that I think are important for students and us to have. I think the other thing we did, like you said, was bring in resources from campus. To make sure that students were aware, now that they were more back and we were getting to be more of a residential experience, they were aware of what's offered. And that's true for things that kind of, the way that I like to say it is, help you stay well. So things like campus rec, the student union, things like that. And then also kind of things that help you get well. So like CAPS or student health, things like that. And we kind of gathered information and made that available to students. And we kind of placed it out in a way where students could gather it at the same time of avoiding whatever stigma may come with that. And, you know, I think our population is changing a little bit and our culture is changing a little bit. And I think there's a lot more acceptance of the need to use resources, which I think is wonderful. But at the same time, it kind of embedded in our culture is this idea of rankings and competition and being the best. And so I think we needed to be mindful of that. So those are kind of two things that we did. Dean Barancott?
Yeah, thanks, Dean K. And so that's right. This is, and you're looking at some of the images of our Be Well event. We got the whole community together, one place, one time. And I think the only thing to add is how great our students were to begin this event. One of the things to help students overcome the stigma of encouraging help seeking behaviors is we had students begin by speaking, and one of them's on our session today. But Trey Ellis, my gosh, what a fantastic job to have Trey, the president of your student body, get up and address his classmates. I thought was an absolutely fantastic way to begin this event as well. So that's how I went about one of our goals. I want to transition to the next slide and talk a little bit about how we went about creating an atmosphere where we could dial down the stress and turn up the fun. So in order to kick off this conversation, I'm going to turn it over to Dean Smith. Dean Smith.
Thanks, Dean Barancott. Good morning again. You know, we approached this goal of having fun and providing some calm relaxation before finals by doing a lot of brainstorming. But before I begin on that, I do want to point out, if those of you who might not know, law school exams are pretty much, most of the grading in law school is based on one exam at the end of the semester. So it's sort of an all or nothing thing, which doesn't help when you're building up to that. And there's so much riding on this one test. There's not a lot of multiple tests along the way. So this time right before exams is already, you know, the tension that we've been talking about is at its highest point. So we really wanted to provide opportunity for folks to put all that aside and to come together to face some of the things that you've been hearing about, right? Get out of isolation, come into the fold, be with your classmates and your faculty and your staff, build the community. So, all of that, we started brainstorming, but I have to say, even though I think, Bianca and John and Rob and I have some pretty good ideas, we didn't want to assume that we knew everything that our students wanted, right? So we really relied on our student partners to go out to their classmates and sort of their constituents and figure out what they needed, and to bring that all into this coalition that we built. And so what you can kind of see are some of those images, and Trey's going to tell you about some of the fun things we came up with. But, there were two pretty big challenges when we thought about hosting an event. First of all, we wanted to do it at our law school, right? That's our space, but we're a law school. We're still doing this law school thing. We have students who are taking classes in the evening. We have students who need the space to study in the evening. So we couldn't just run amok and party all throughout the law school, because we needed to be conscious and aware of the fact that that building is important for other reasons. And then we still have a pandemic, and we wanted to have a large crowd, and thank goodness we did, but how do we manage that crowd in a safe way, and how to provide opportunities for students and community members that were coming with different comfort levels, right? We wanted to have food and all of that. So I'm going to let Trey talk about what we came up with and how it worked within those challenges. But again, I think we can say that we faced them and overcame them and had a really fun event. So, Trey.
Yes, thank you, Dean Smith. Various challenges in putting this event together and putting the fun aspects of this event together. Like Dean Smith alluded to, at the time, the mask mandate was still going, varying comfort levels, which, are still at play now. And so, navigating and figuring all of that out, we ended up doing a combination of indoor and outdoor activities, and beyond just the concerns about COVID, like Dean Smith also talked about, just worried about noise, obviously, with a lot of traffic and people talking and having a good time. Noise comes with that. And, we wanted to make this a fun, successful event, but at the end of the day, it was still at the law school. So some great ideas Dean Berencott and the administration collab with students on is putting smaller, more quiet gatherings indoors, and more of the larger, louder gatherings outdoors, and in like louder, bigger spaces. And so that's kind of how we were able to remedy that while still, keeping it at a site that was most accessible to the students, to the student body. And so kind of dealing with that putting forth those solutions was how we dealt with those problems. And I'd love to go ahead and just get into what we offered and the aspects of the event that were available. So one of the first things that happened, as Dean Berencott alluded to, is that I spoke, and members of the administration spoke and addressed the students that had come out, and I think it did a great job of really setting the tone of the event, and just having students know that this is no kind of formality, no kind of uptight, anything like that. Just to have fun and let loose, and just forget about all things law school, even if it's just for like 15 minutes. And that's another aspect of the event before I get into like the activities that I thought was amazing. We invited students just to come and walk through if they could, and not necessarily come to stay for an hour, but any break, from their studies, or any break from the just monotonous day-to-day was a break. And so that was our goal in doing that. And so, although some students we did offer for some students to stay a short period of time, I would wager that a lot stayed a long period of time due to the things that we had to offer there. So one of the things that was at play at the beginning was music. We had a speaker outside while also serving pizza, again, keeping in mind those COVID concerns, allowing people only to eat the pizza outside with the music playing. And she didn't say this, but Dean Smith was the DJ for the outdoor area, and she was an amazing, amazing DJ. So if you have any upcoming events, please book her, see her inquiry, her email. I'll have her shoot that in the chat for later on. And then also, so like I said, we had pizza in the outdoor area. Once you walk into the indoor area, in the main kind of common area, we call the rotunda in the law school, we had a cocoa bar, hot cocoa bar, which was sponsored by the North Carolina Bar Association, where essentially, yeah, we had hot cocoa, marshmallows, and surrounding in that area were tables for students to, go to find their mental health resources, talk about community groups. We had T-shirts, and so just all around, centered around that hot cocoa bar. So that was something that was inside, that caused that was a little bit, had student traffic in there, but still, not enough to create enough noise. Again, keeping in mind that we are still in an academic space, that we wanted to respect other people's learning and studying. And so that was another aspect. Now the final two are probably arguably the most popular. So we had, as you can see in the pictures, dogs were there, so people love that. And they're also equally, if not more popular, were the bunnies that were present. So we had bunnies, collaborated with Dean Bierencott, and students got together on that and just, proposed the idea of, people love animals, people love furry friends. And so having those at the event would likely bring a lot of people out to the event. And it did. And people very much enjoyed them. And they were cute too. So that was awesome. And the last thing that was available at the event was something that's called the silent disco. Now, for those who may not be familiar with that, as you can see in the picture, a silent disco is essentially everyone is listening to the same music in those headphones that you see on the table, but no music is playing out loud. So like literally everyone's listening, grooving to the music in a room. And it's funny, I'll have to, I wish I could show you all a recording of it. Essentially everybody's just dancing, but no music's playing out loud. So on like the recording on my phone that I have of people, you just hear sneaker squeaks of people just dancing. And no one on this call will say that, but if there were a top four of, we were to give out awards for the top four of the best dancers at the silent disco, those four people may or may not be on the call: Dean Smith, Dean Bierencott, Dean Mack, Professor Nixon. And I'm willing to bet that the reason this person is in the top four because he was handling the creativity part of the event, Dean K. But yes, so we had a great time. And I may or may not have done the bump with Professor Nixon while we were in the silent disco room. So it was just a great time for the professors, for administration, students to really just let loose and have a great time. And so those were the aspects of the event that we offered. And I have it on good authority that students enjoyed every single last one of those. And so yes, that's the summary of the fun stuff that we had for the students. And I think it was a great success.
Awesome. Thanks, Trey. Let's talk a little bit now about our final goal, our third goal, and that's building community. And how we approached this was we just wanted to reverse this trend of, it seemed the divisions were very pronounced. The things that were dividing us as a community seemed to be placed under a magnifying glass, and yet all the things that we would normally rely on to bring us back together were simultaneously undermined as a result of the pandemic. So we just approached this by saying we want to be very conscious about bringing our community together, eliminate the divisions, and let's really focus on what unites us as a law school community. And to talk a little bit about some of the challenges, I'll turn it over to Jacob and then to Julius. Jacob?
Yeah, so to carry on the thought from what Rob was saying, it was, let's just call it what it is, like a very difficult time. But politics, law school naturally is isolating because like it is that one grade that Dean Smith was telling us about, but it's also graded on a curve. So some people don't like to really talk to other people in law school. And then I don't know about y'all, but like my family's also been driving me crazy because they're opinionated about like everything in the world going on. And it's just been like a really wild 2 years, just really, really strange. And there was just this angst, I think, that was just palpable in the air. And we really wanted to try and start weaving some threads back together in our tapestry that united us instead of focusing on all that was sort of going wrong in the world. Julius?
I guess just to add into that, what's inherent in this process of community building is socialization and gathering. And that was very difficult in the fall because a lot of people were hesitant. The pandemic was still going on. People did not want to, I guess, be around others. As I mentioned before, people were very quick to get out of the law school. And I'm the type of person, and I think a lot of people on this call are the type of people to smile and check on everyone as they come through the law school. But like wearing masks, it was very difficult to see that someone was smiling at you. And so you just have someone, like staring at you and just like, okay, what's going on there? And as Jacob said, it was a very difficult time and we still have a lot of work to do. But I think that we've made a lot of active efforts to tie everyone together and to just enjoy a shared space. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
So now we'll turn to some of the solutions we implemented, and one of them was just to brand the event. And on one of the slide you're looking at, Better Together, that was our theme. That's how we branded it. We just think life and law school in particular, it's done better in community. And so this logo was on the RSVP, it was on the t-shirts, it was on the signage during the event. So we wanted our environment to reflect our values on this particular point. Jacob, let's turn to you to talk about how we helped students form community, something that's been difficult to do in the pandemic.
Yeah, so many of the opportunities to connect with your peers in law school, it's oriented around some sort of legal identity, whether it's you're in the sports and entertainment law club, or you're in the Federalist Society, or you're in the National Lawyers Guild. Like there's opportunities to connect, but all of them are sort of oriented in a professional space. And our thought was, well, let's just like have just clubs where humans can be humans. So there, we made a reality trash TV club. There's a brewery hopping club. There's a take a walk club. There's just on a like very basic, like human to human level, like what are you interested in? This is what I'm also interested in. And let's try to build a relationship there. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and, since we're running out of time, I'll go ahead and hit the Julius.
Great, take it away, Julius.
No, I do appreciate that. I think that another fun aspect of building community was ultimately promoting the event. I got to reach out and talk to a lot of people and hang out with these amazing guys and just, I guess, work towards building community. And I think that, just going back to that, promoting the event was one of the best parts of getting to know a lot of different people and I guess connecting faces and I guess masked faces to the faces that I'm used to seeing on Zoom and getting to meet a lot of the upperclassmen and the first years. And that was truly appreciated. And I think another part of it was that in building our community, we also wanted to recognize that we have extended members of our community, the family and friends that support all of the law students, the administration, staff. And so one of the things that we made active efforts to do was to schedule this at a time in which people could bring their families and friends to see the Carolina law community. And what I appreciated a great deal about, I guess, offering that extension was we kind of made a bold statement saying that the Carolina law community is invested in building community as well as promoting mental health. And that was the best part about it.
And so that's how we went about our 3 goals. And what I'll do now is I'll just invite people to reflect and share your thoughts. Now, here we are on the other side of the event. Let's just ask the students, what's your takeaway? How would you evaluate the event?
I'll jump in just because I had mentioned those clubs. We had, I don't know how many, the final number for total attendees that showed up. I think it was well over 250. But for clubs in and of itself, like we had approximately 90 students sign up across the board for we have about 15 or so different clubs. So it was just a realization that, wow, like this desire to connect and build a community exists within the law school. And particularly in this time, we needed to take this moment and pause and see, like, where just all of us at on a human to human level. And then I'll also say, like, I remember as we were leading up to the planning, I think just in the environment that is law school, and everyone on this call, even though we don't want to admit it, like, we're all high achievers and we don't like to fail anyway. So there was a little bit of like nervousness around, like, are people going to show up if we do this? Like, it's the pandemic, law students want to study, professors got to be professing and writing papers. Like, is this going to work out? And I remember just saying, like, hey, if just one student shows up, like, no matter how much we spend on this, if one student shows up and gets support, like, that's a win. And then it was just, I mean, it was crazy. It was like, there was so many people there, and it just, like, the spirit of the building, like, was sort of reborn in that moment. And it was just really special to see.
Yeah, and just kind of building off that, I think the event was a great one. And hearing from, in my own opinion, and also hearing from other students. And I think one of the aspects that's kind of been brushed over in us talking a little bit here is the role of administration in putting this event together was really, was monumental, particularly the way that it happened. Soliciting students for ideas and willing to collaborate with students, but also at the same time, not putting the full onus on students to make it happen and really making it a collaborative thing. That's, a method that I think a lot of students who had hands in this really appreciated, just giving ideas, and then, Dean Bierencott going and handling like the logistics of how to get the puppies and bunnies and all of that. And so, and although, that's not necessarily something that might be able to happen every time, it is like a great method that was very helpful in putting this together. And I think the response was great from students, so much so that they've requested another one. So these events are likely to happen pretty regularly, maybe on a semester basis, we'll see. But yes, another one is on the horizon, and another students want to see another one. So.
Dean Smith, do you want to share from an administration perspective how you would evaluate the event?
I mean, certainly echoing what you've heard from the students, because I think we went into it, with a focus on student wellness and student community building. But what I think was so wonderful is that it fed all of our souls. So it's not been super fun to be a higher ed administrator or law school administrator through 2 years of a pandemic and the other challenges that we are facing in our society. So to be able to also get to sort of leave that behind and just have fun and get to be friends with the students. And it wasn't about, trying to solve a problem. It was just about being together. I mean, we were addressing this overall wellness approach, but I just love seeing my colleagues. People brought their families, both our students and our faculty and staff. So, it's great. I saw kids that I hadn't seen for 2 years, right? That had clearly grown up. And just remember that we all are humans, despite the fact that we are all part of this law school community. And so that was just something that was really important, I think, for a lot of the faculty and staff who came, and for the administrators to be able to be in that space with our students and sort of not have to be the administrator and the student. So.
Thanks, Dean Smith. I think that's a great last word for the formal portion of our program. I see that we are up against our time block. So I do want to invite Donna Nixon to come back in. And I think panelists, if you're okay, our presenters sticking around in case there's a couple questions that you might be able to respond to. And I will turn it back over to Donna and just thank everyone for the privilege of your time today.
Thank you for that presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that the folks on this call are able to gather some ways that we can build community throughout the libraries, throughout the university, based on this presentation. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and if you have a question, please just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. And meanwhile, I put in the chat an invitation to the next set of sessions, which will begin at 11:15. Questions? If you want to follow up with us, you want to follow up with any of the panelists, I have their contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me, Donna Nixon, at dnixon@email.unc.edu. Thank you. And I want to point out that these folks are all on break and they have taken the time to be with us today. So kudos to you. Thank you very much. And I will see you all later. Thanks.